Hello, everybody. Welcome to Stories Live. This is the August edition, and our theme is Rebel Rebel. So, hopefully, we have some stories of a rebellious nature tonight. So, our readers tonight include Gwynne Stanker, Emily Bybee, Cory Swanson, and Richard Friesan. Richard has warned me that his story is R-rated, so probably just want to brace yourself for that. Let's see. I just have a few things I want to make sure I announce before I forget. One thing is, if you are interested in attending a writers conference, Rocky Mountain Fiction Writers Conference is coming up in October. That's going to be from October 15th to October 17th. And I'm actually presenting at that conference. It'll be really exciting. I'm presenting on using grief in stories, and that's going to be at 4 p.m. on a Friday. So, it's going to be lit, or at least I'm going to be lit, because if the bar is open, that's where I'm stopping first. Anyway, let's see. Well, I can share some details about the costs of that and registration options. They do have a virtual and an in-person track. So, and the virtual track's a little less expensive, but has more limited offerings. So, just so you know. All right, and also just for some housekeeping, our next show is going to be September 15th at 7 p.m. So that's the third Wednesday of September. And so, yeah, I think that's all you have to hear me blab about. So I will just get on with the show. So the first person we have is Gwynne, and she actually had a story included in the anthology, actually the first ever edition of the Pikes Peak Writers anthology called Fresh Starts. So I'm going to go ahead and add Gwynne to the stream here. Hello.
Hi.
It's so good to see you again. And you're rocking the pink
to be back.
frames.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. So yeah, what are you reading tonight?
Okay, I got waked up in the middle of the night about 3 months ago by a girl by the name of Addie Butters in my mind, and she wouldn't let me sleep till I got up and wrote her story. I don't normally write in dialect, but it was 3 a.m. and I was writing down as she spoke. And so you're not going to hear my normal third person close voice. You're going to get Addie Butters. It's in dialect, but it's pretty much plain English, maybe a few Southern aphorisms thrown in, but other than that. And this is also, though not rated R, it's a story for grown-ups. And she's definitely a rebel.
Yeah, I like me some adult entertainment, so that's fine.
Okay.
Now, what's the name of this piece you have in process here? Or is it Untitled?
Addie Butters.
Oh, Addie Butters. Okay.
That's her name.
All right, Gwynne, I will let you and Addie take it away here.
All righty. Thanks so much. Addie Butters. We Butterses have been on Pitcher Mountain for several generations. It's told we started out in a town down on the flats somewhere, but my pa's pa and his brothers caused so much trouble that the town throwed them out. They didn't go far, just up the side of the mountain to Pahoxie, and we've been here ever since. Butters women tend to die in childbirth or to live long into the starving, wrinkled chicken age, as my pa, Martin Butters, would say. See, some old ladies there is as gets fat, but all the Butters grannies go meatless into old age. Though we are a milk-skinned lot on the whole, with time the old men, them what makes it, which is a very few, turn all dark and shriveled like cured jerky, the kind that'll plumb break your tooth when you go to chew on it, or so says my pa. So now I guess that's what we got to look forward to, chickens and jerks. Ah, I say only a few of the men as makes it, because they are all, for the most part, a bad bunch, what tends to get beat up, stabbed, shot, dead of the drink, or throwed in the sheriff's prison down to Fort Suther. I was the last one my ma popped out afore she went up yonder to be with the angels, I hope. After enduring my pa and 5 mean boys, she had me and just gave out. Myself, I believe she just couldn't stand her life, and the only way to get out of it was to die, so she went and done that. I was the only girl, and that's not a good thing to be in a lot like the Butters. When I turned 12, my oldest brother Ephraim jumped me. I could usually outrun them all, but this time he cornered me in the barn and he hurt me bad, practically split me up the middle. I wasn't never the same after that. I don't want that to happen to my daughter. I might just have to kill someone to prevent it, and I would. You'd better believe I would. After that, all the boys tried to have a go at me, and when they come after me in twos and threes, they succeeded if they could catch me. Every now and then they did. I've got to tell you, it's made me some mean. A part of me has done shriveled up before its time. My pa loved me in his way, I think, and he tried to protect me, but he was an old man by the time I came along, and anyways, he wasn't to home all the time. So, you see, my growing up wasn't pretty. One day, this squinty eyed kid named of Cecil Cameron started coming over and sniffing round me. At the time, it seemed to me like he was my way out. So at 14, I married into the Camerons. No fancy ceremony or nothing. I just left my pa and brothers and went up mountain with Cecil to the Cameron's place and lived with him. So, though don't nobody care at all, in the eyes of the law, I guess I'm still Addie Butters. It don't make no never mind to me. At first, it was some better over to Cameron's because in the beginning Cecil cared. My brothers come after me, but Cecil and the Camerons closed ranks against my brothers. They snuck off with their tails atwixt their legs. Then Cecil, who wasn't afraid of nobody and fought like a cornered badger, turned right around and snarled all his cousins off me. I had to cook and clean for the Camerons now, and being the youngest and newest wife, I got all the hard, dirty work. I didn't mind building a fire and getting out the big tubs and the washboard, though, because it got me outside and away from the whole lot of them. Actually, though Cecil kept the men off me, it was the women that was the worst. They hated each other, but they hated me more because whenever I would walk by, all the men would hot eye me. They didn't do it because I am pretty, because I ain't. I know that. But because I was young and fresh meat. Then women wanted to hurt me, but not too much, because at 14 I was slave labor and was doing all the jobs they didn't want to do. So the first time I done the wash, they got themselves together and went and set up my tubs amongst the batch of stinging nettles. I was barefoot and wearing this little cotton shift. Well, sir, away I went, swishing through them tall weeds. Right quick, it commenced to feel like 1,000 red ants was stinging my bare feet and legs, It hurt like hell, I can tell you. Cecil only stood there and laughed with the rest of them. He wasn't about to interfere amongst the women. No, sirree. I was on my own. So after that, I hated all of them right back. Butters may be a lot of things, but we ain't quitters. I stuck it out. I got tougher. I became like them stinging nettles, looking just like a no account weed till you stepped on me, then watch out. I had me this big old wooden pounding mallet that I used to wash the heavy blankets and such. One day, when one of them women was coming down hard on me, screeching and beating me across the shoulders with her broom handle, well, I turned round fast and without looking, I whopped her back as hard as I could with that big old mallet. Water was flying everywhere, and oh lordy, the mallet happened to catch her upside the head. It didn't kill her, but ever after that, she weren't never quite the same. Always walking kind of sideways funny. I figured there'd be all hell to pay, but to my surprise, there weren't nobody sympathizing with her. She had underestimated her enemy. The women all stayed off of me after that. Then one day, not long after I turned 15, my belly started to swell. I ain't had much schooling, but even I knew what that meant. In some ways, I had grown tougher, but after a few months, I was getting off balance, belly sticking way out, and it became harder to do my chores. Nobody offered to help me, and I didn't expect them to. It wasn't like we women was any of us bosom buddies or nothing. I was starting to feel kind of desperate when word came up the mountain that my pa was dying and asking for his Addie. Even Camerons knew they couldn't keep a young'un from saying goodbye to her dying pa, so they had to let me go. I didn't know what was waiting for me on the other end, but it was for sure Cecil Cameron wasn't at this one no more. Come the first snow thaw, he had took hisself off to ride the rails without a single howdy do nor goodbye to me. It was always plain to see that he was feckless, and not one you could tie down for long. To be honest, I think it was the baby scared him off. I didn't mind, though, not one little bit. I didn't have no money, but I toddled on down the hill to where the old yellow roundabout rumbled to its stop. I didn't dare bring nothing with me for fear of tipping the Camerons off. So I was just standing there, barefoot and plenty pregnant. Bus driver would have heard of my paw, of course. News of death and dying travels fast, even in the backwoods. I didn't have to try too hard to look pathetic. Driver must have felt sorry for me because he let me get on and didn't put me out till we was down close to Pahoxie. I walked up the hill to the old house. I hadn't been back since I left, but it seemed to me like the old place had shrunk. So had Pa. My brothers was still there, though, vying to see who got what once the old man went 10 toes up. I walked up them rickety steps and right through the lot of them worthless boys. I was leaning on that big wash mallet, but of course I didn't really need a crutch. There was still 5 of them and 1 of me, but I wasn't no little kid no more. For the first time in my life, I wasn't a scared of them, and I think they knew it. They might have got me, but they was cowards, and I would have bad hurt a couple of them first. Maybe it was just that there was a scart the Camerons would get them if they messed with me. To this day, I don't know, but I walked straight on up through them and into Pa's room, where I propped his door shut with the mallet. Pa had not done right by me, but I stood there next to that bed and cried like a little bitty baby. He put his big calloused hand on my arm and brung me in close. His breath smelt of vinegar and rot, his voice hoarse as a rusty hinge. I promised your ma I'd do right by you, girl, but I didn't. I know that. I've left the whole kit and caboodle to you, my girl. The house, the barn, the livestock, and my rifle. Here he stopped and went still. I dropped my head because I thought he was gone. But then I gave a little jump because suddenly he sort of shuddered and went and hacked up this bloody wad. Then he went on in a whisper, Addie, there's money in a bank down to Fort Suther. The will's there too, all done up right and proper in your name. Your brothers ain't going to take it lying down. So you get yourself down to the sheriff. He knows what to do. It's not like every one of them boys ain't been in his jail. He'll kick them worthless boys out of town. I know what they done, Addie. I know what they done. I hope you'll think a good thought about your worthless old pa now and then. And Addie, if you have a boy, maybe you can name him Martin, can't you? Then he laid his head back down and gave out this one huge, racking cough, what purely shook the bed. It was just like somebody had killed the chicken and strewed the bloody innards on his poor, bony chest. He'd done coughed up his own lungs. When I limped back out his bedroom door, this time I needed the support of that mallet. They all just looked at me. I just said, he's dead. Then I stumped back on down the hill and caught the roundabout down to Fort Suther. I never did get Pa's rifle. One of the boys made off with it, but everything else went just the way Pa wanted. I paid off the driver of the roundabout when I came out of the bank. Where Pa got that big of a stash, I don't know, but it's going on 6 years now, and it has kept me and my girl Marty in flour and sugar and coal. I used to worry the Camerons would come for Marty. If she'd been a boy, they'd have come in force with their rifles and sent their women in to take that baby away from me. I seen them do it once. They tore that newborn baby out of the mother's arms, and her screaming and begging most piteous. I won't never forget her screams. There weren't nobody to bring them to justice because she went and hanged herself 3 days later. Nobody on the mountain could stand against the Camerons when they turned out in force, except maybe the army from down to Fort Suther, and even then, Camerons would just melt back into the forest, baby and all. They'd wait it out till the feds gave up and went back down the mountain. I hated to disappoint my pa's dying wish, but I was purely glad she was born a girl. To the Camerons, girls ain't worth a plugged nickel. I went ahead and named her Marty for my pa. I think Pa would have liked that. I would have never thought it, but I have been happy living here alone these past 6 years. Ain't nobody seen hide nor hair of a Cecil Cameron, and I wouldn't have it any other way. I do need help from time to time with the heavy chores. There's this handyman, name of Nicholas Durand, comes round to do that regular. He's some part Injun, I think. Always brings his little sister Ava to play with my Marty. I can pay him good money for his help, though he does far more than I pay him for, always talking exceeding polite and calling me Miss Butters. I ain't seen fit to enlighten him on that score. Besides, that's all I really am anyways. Just plain Addie Butters, like always. There is some as says them Durans is strange folk, especially the old grandfather, him being a medicine man or some such. Maybe it's true, I wouldn't know. But it is a fact that most families has a weirdness in some part of them. We Butters more than most. Maybe we're just better at hiding our strangeness than the Injun folk. Maybe Nicholas Duran's kind don't care to hide nothing, not being in the least bit ashamed of who he is. Now, don't you know, that is a thought I would like to learn to think. I don't never remember not being ashamed of being a Butters. Still, I do think of Pa most nearly every day.
I take it that was the end.
That was the end.
Okay, good. I didn't miss my big part. All right. Well, that was most excellent, Gwynne. I love your reading style and just such a, strong narrative voice. And I mean, as Jeff noted, but I agree with him 100%. Anyway, yeah, so I'm glad that, Addie woke you up and had you tell her story. That sounds like it worked out well for both of you. So are you submitting this anywhere or?
I haven't. I probably will. I've got 3 or 4 more stories that involve Addie Butters and her Indian handyman, Nicholas Duran. But this is written in dialect. I'm told most editors don't care for it. To be honest, I couldn't bear to leave her voice behind and write it in third person, which is, I'm sure, much more acceptable. But yeah, I do have more stories by her, and maybe one of these days I'll put them all together in a long short story and send them off. Who knows?
Yeah. Well, I think that, you made a good choice keeping the dialect and, I mean, who cares about editors and all of them? I mean, we're rebelling. We're rebelling tonight.
Yeah,
do it
right.
Your way. Everyone's just doing it their way tonight. So, yes. Okay. Well, I will give you some relief from the hot seat here and bring up our next victim, reader. Okay. So let's see. Next up, we have Emily. Hello.
Hello.
So, what have you got for us tonight?
So I am going to be reading the first chapter of a new novella that is gonna replace the prequel that I have out right now for my series.
Okay.
I got some feedback from readers that they were upset that I left them with a cliffhanger ending with my free prequel that I have out right now. So I promised that I would take that one back and actually finish that story and republish it through my publisher, and I would put out a new free prequel. So the working title of this one is actually Rebel Magic, but I think I'm going to have to come up with a different name because I believe that one's been used more than once.
Okay.
At least I think it's not as unique as I need it. So so this is in the world of my series, the Unstable Magic series. But this happens 14 years prior to the first book, Fractured Magic. Yeah, so it's just going to be the free prequel that I put out. The 4th book was supposed to be coming out, but some life's gotten in the way, so it's probably not going to be out until early next year. But I'm hoping that the prequel I'll be able to put out before the end of the year, just to give readers something new, so they don't have to wait too long. So yeah, so it's the first chapter. But
all right,
yeah.
I will let you read it. I'm very excited. So.
Okay. So this is, I write mostly sweet paranormal romance at the moment. So this is going to be sweet paranormal romance. And I write in first person. So, all right, here we go. 14 years ago. If we get caught, the council will kill us, if we're lucky. Chris glanced around like a B-rated actor in a spy movie. No one on the patio seats paid the least attention to our conversation. They kept drinking their coffee in ignorant bliss of the real dangers in their midst. Why is some defect our problem? Though he spat the word defect, no real heat filled his voice, only sadness. That defect is your little sister, I said, and leaned forward. Chris's sister, Sarah, had the unfortunate problem of being born different than normal witches. Her spells erupted into flames. Besides the obvious danger, being a defect was a death sentence in the witch world. You don't have to play the good little witch for me. Levi, I appreciate your warning us, but my parents don't want me involved. They're going to hand Sarah over. His fist gripped the coffee cup. They're too afraid of her. That her was the council's new lead enforcer. She delivered especially brutal and bloody deaths to anyone who showed the least opposition to council rule. The entire witch world shit their pants at the thought of a visit from Clara Stark. Listen, I've been thinking a lot over the last year since what happened. I paused to take a breath. Even thinking of the incident, as my mother referred to it, flooded me with a collage of emotions. Everything from helplessness to sadness to fear, but mostly rage. I'm not going to stand by and let the council hurt innocent people if I can help it. His stoic expression crumbled, and he wiped a hand over his face. I don't know what to do, Levi. She's only 10. His facade dissolved completely, and he deflated in his chair. A linebacker of a guy with the shoulders to prove it, he shrank in on himself. Chris's parents did their best to hide Sarah's condition, but the council found defects eventually. His voice dropped to a whisper. I'm her brother. I'm supposed to protect her. I leaned back and let the California sun warm my skin. I'd floated along, not rocking the boat, and hating myself over it for months, bottling up the self-loathing that filled my chest with black tar. But that bottle was full. Any more and I'd burst. If we tried to battle the council, we'd lose, no question. We couldn't take them head on. But maybe we could outsmart them. We needed to treat this like guerrilla warfare. Be the enemy they couldn't see. I jerked straight in my seat. What if she disappeared? Chris's brow scrunched. No one can run away from the council. They always find them. Don't I know it? No, I mean if she already died. Or they think she is dead. Understanding dropped his mouth open. How? Who would raise her? The plan erupted in my mind as if I'd been a rebel my entire life. How far are you willing to go to save her from the council? I'll do anything. Even if you don't remember? Even if you don't know if she's alive? You're worried about the truth spells. I nodded. If you know the truth, the council knows the truth. And they'll find her anyway. His jaw firmed. Whatever we need to do, I'm fine with. But I can't ask you to risk yourself. I downed the rest of my coffee and stood. Are you kidding? This is the most alive I've felt in a year. It was like waking from a drug haze. For the first time in a year, I had a purpose. I'll owe you for the rest of my life, even if I have no idea what you did. He stood, and we headed for my Mustang convertible, hope glinting in his eyes. Really, Levi, I can't even. Moisture clouded his eyes. I clapped him on the back. No, I owe you for saving me from a lifetime of misery. I climbed into the driver's seat. Come on, we have a lot to do. Plans spun through my head as I pulled to a stop in the curved driveway in front of my parents' seaside home. The large estate backed to the ocean and secluded beaches. If I was lucky, Mom would be at the country club schmoozing in the witch city. She spent most of her days on her full-time mission, finding me a wife. I closed the front door and hope evaporated. Mom's laugh, forced and faked as half the chests in Hollywood, echoed off the polished marble floor. You should have seen him, standing there as sweet as can be, holding out a bouquet of dandelions. He sounds like a perfect little gentleman, a female voice I didn't recognize responded. My shoulders drooped. Oh, God, the dandelion story. Please not today. Ever since the betrothal my parents had arranged when I was 4 was destroyed last year, my mother thought of nothing besides finding a suitable replacement. By her standards, the task was nearly impossible. Really, what she was looking for was a superficial ditz with family connections who she could manipulate. As far as I was concerned, she could search all she wanted. I wasn't about to be forced into another arranged betrothal. Levi, is that you, darling? Mom appeared around the corner from the living room, her hair in its usual blonde waves, not a strand out of place, and diamonds dripping from her ears and neck. She'd pulled out all the stops to impress. Ah, wonderful. I have someone I'd like you to meet. She waved me forward. I ran my tongue over my teeth and bit back the multitude of expletives that clamored to escape. Now really isn't the best time, Mother. I tried for an exhausted tone. Her smile hardened into cement. Don't be rude, dear. I raised you better than that. She walked over and ran her fingers through my hair to calm my 60-mile-an-hour style. I told you to get a haircut, she hissed. I liked the surfer vibe. My hair grazed my shoulders now. Isn't blonde and tan the California look? Blonde, but not homeless. She straightened my polo shirt, brushing away wrinkles that weren't there until I felt like a 5-year-old, then linked her arm with mine in an iron grip. She whispered, This one has potential. Don't screw it up. Great. That was Mom speak, for she came from a prominent family with connections. The last girl she brought home had still been in braces. Mother didn't care about the age gap. What our families could accomplish together was the important thing. Smile pasted across my face, I rounded the corner to the living room. My legs forgot how to walk, and I nearly tripped over my feet. Mom's grip on my arm was all that kept me from making an unforgettable first impression with a faceplant into the floor. With the afternoon light streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows behind her, she looked like an angel with a halo of dark curls, flecked with fiery reds around her face. Luminous golden brown eyes locked with mine. Then she smiled. The usually gorgeous ocean views out the windows behind her might as well have been of a garbage dump. Intelligible words bled out my ears, along with all coherent thought. I'd met plenty of beautiful women before, but something about her reached into my chest and ripped my heart out. Levi, this is Jade. Jade, Levi. Mom waved a hand between us. And this is Mrs. Azula, her mother. I at least remembered to close my gaping mouth before drool dribbled down my lip. Mom jerked on my arm. It's so nice to meet you, Jade, Mrs. Azula. My voice sounded relatively normal. Muscle memory took over for my fumbling brain, and I fell into the role I'd played since I was old enough to talk. I hope my mother hasn't bored you too much with the escapades of my youth. No, Jade said. I quite enjoyed hearing them, Levi. Her voice carried an exotic accent. Not too heavy, just a touch. The way my name rolled off her tongue melted my bones. She leaned forward and rested her chin on her hand. You can tell a lot about a person from the type of child they are, or were. Ah, well, you have an advantage over me then. Why don't we sit? And I'll have some refreshments brought in. Mother motioned to the suede leather couches that formed 3 sides of a square around the wall that housed a massive stone fireplace, and rang for the servant. And Levi can tell you about his plans once he joins the council. I blinked and opened my mouth to steer the subject away from witch politics, but she beat me to it. My brother has been on the council for the last 2 decades. He was in his early 20s, like Levi, when he was selected. Mom must really like this girl. She usually held that information back until the second meeting, if there was one. She laid all her trump cards on the table. With the right match, I'm sure Levi will be following in his footsteps. He already serves on the junior council. Her gaze rested on Jade, whose eyes lit at the mention of a council seat. My jaw tightened at the mention of the forced servitude my mother voluntold me for. The sole job of the junior counselor was to monitor for defects. My position was the only reason I could give Chris a couple days' warning about his sister before they came for her. What a fabulous family tree you have, Jade said, and my heart crumbled to dust. She was like my mother, beautiful and power-hungry. So what are your plans, Levi? Fuck this. Well, for starters, I'll abolish any punishment for standing up to the council. Or maybe get rid of the council altogether and make the witch world a democracy. Might as well torpedo this quick and put myself out of my misery. Then I think I'll announce our presence to humans, so we could help the world instead of getting richer off of them. A tomb-like silence fell over the room. Though I didn't look her way, my mother's glare burned into the side of my head like a laser. Mrs. Azula's brow shot to the ceiling, and Jade blinked rapidly. I met her gaze, expecting some kind of disgust or appalled look, but instead found a spark of something else. She slapped her thighs and turned to my mother. You were so right, she said with a laugh. He is absolutely hysterical. Mother's relieved laugh joined hers, and Mrs. Azula shook her head at me. You had me there for a moment, young man. She wagged a finger in the air, and a multitude of bracelets jangled on her wrists. But I wouldn't have traveled all this way without doing some research first, especially where my Jade is concerned. I stared at the three cackling women. My mother made sure I looked good on paper. Plus, she made me the victim of the story of the incident. How she pulled that off, I'll never know. The servant brought in a tray of snacks and coffee, leaving as silently as she'd appeared. Jade's gaze settled on me as she chewed a bite of cheese, but this was no superficial glance. She assessed me with a keen eye. I wasn't sure if I felt like an opponent in a chess match or a prime steak. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I pulled it out to read the text. Staying here sounded about as fun as a lobotomy with a rusty spoon. Ah, I'm so sorry to have to do this. Thank God for well-timed interruptions. I stood and pocketed the phone. But I have a bit of an emergency to attend to. Council business, you know. Mother's eyes narrowed, and she met my gaze for a beat and a stare down. But I matched her heat with my own. Chris needed me. Sarah needed me. I hope to see you again soon, Jade. Or never. Or maybe. Whatever. I don't have time for this. She reached out and ran her fingers over my hand. You can be sure of it. Okay, so tell me how you aren't going to kill me again? Chris asked. We stood in the garage of his parents' house. Dude, give me a break. I smacked his arm. I'm like 90% sure I won't kill you. He paced in front of his car. This is really the best we can come up with? On 24 hours' notice, with only the two of us? It's amazing we have any plan at all. I threw my arms out to the side. Do you know what I had to do to get a young girl's dead body? How many people I had to use thought manipulation on? Never mind. You don't want to know. I appreciate the risk you're taking for me, for Sarah. I stepped in front of him to stop his back and forth movement. If we do nothing, they're coming for your sister tomorrow. The council will take her and strip her magic. He turned away, but I held his shoulders so he would listen. She has less than a 10% chance of coming out of that spell with her brain even slightly intact. 60% of them die before the council even finishes, and the other 30% who survive are in a vegetative state for the rest of their short lives. I know, he shouted, ripping away from my grasp. He slammed a hand on the hood of the car, leaving a 6-inch dent in the metal. I know. He let out a gale-force sigh. As long as you promise me she'll be safe, that she'll grow up to be happy. I'll do the best I possibly can, but we don't have much time. He nodded. Okay, let's do this. I'll meet you before the cliffs. I climbed into the Mustang and sped out of the driveway. Sweat beaded my brow despite the cool of the evening, and I swallowed against my dry throat, my bravado all used up. One thing was for sure. After tonight, nothing would be the same. 5 miles from Chris's house, I pulled off on the scenic overlook. I tapped on the steering wheel in a manic rhythm and watched the rearview mirror. Each minute that passed ratcheted my heart rate up a notch, while thoughts raced through my mind. What if the council came early? What if someone discovered my plan? If I got pulled over, how would I explain the dead body in my trunk? The electric blue of Chris's Camaro came into view, weaving along the Oceanside Highway. I jerked from my slouch and popped my door open. Chris pulled in the overlook behind me and climbed from the car, followed by the small figure of his sister, Sarah. I thought we were going to get ice cream, Sarah said, then paused when she spotted me. Levi! She ran and wrapped her arms around my waist. Hey, kiddo! I lifted her and spun her in a circle. Then I set her down. I crouched in the gravel and brushed a lock of her dark hair behind her ear. Listen, I have to tell you something, and I need you to be really brave. The smile slid from her lips like melted butter off pancakes. The council's coming, aren't they? She glanced back at Chris. That's why my mom and dad have been acting so weird and sad. Chris nodded. But we aren't going to let them take you. I want you to trust Levi. He's going to help us. Her brow furrowed and her gaze, quite perceptive for a 10-year-old, darted between us. But if he interferes, they'll kill him as well. Her voice rose to a mouse's squeak. They'll send Clara Stark. I don't want her to kill you too, Levi. Hey, I gave her shoulders a squeeze. Do you trust me? Eyes wide, she nodded. Say bye to your brother, and then get in the back seat of my car and lay down under the blanket. Chris wrapped her in a hug so tight it might crush her little bones. I'll always love you, he choked out, and I'll always be with you. He pressed something into her hand, then ushered her to my car. Checking that no cars passed, I popped my trunk, and we transferred the child's body I'd procured. Without looking at the pale face, I buckled her into the front seat of Chris's Camaro. Blowing out a breath to calm the bile clawing its way up my throat, I faced my childhood friend. Ready? If anything happens, and I don't make it, I want you to know I'm grateful. No one else would even risk themselves to help us, not even family. I gripped his shoulder. God, please don't let me screw this up. I got this, I swear. Before either of us could second-guess our plan, I dove into Chris's mind with my magic. I plucked the memories of our plot out of his brain like weeds and put inane conversations about parties in their place. Careful to cover my tracks, I hopefully left no evidence of tampering for the council to find. Memory augmentation was one of my specialties, but the council had way more power at their disposal. Chris blinked, in a daze, not seeing me, and I guided him to the car, then settled him in the driver's seat, leaving off his seatbelt. You're going to go for a drive and get your sister some ice cream as a surprise treat, I said. You better get going. On autopilot, he pulled out of the overlook and curved in and out of sight around the Ocean View Highway. I gathered my magic and waited until the last passing car was out of sight. Jaw rigid to stop my muscles from shaking, and holding on to my nerve, I twisted my hand. The Camaro swerved left, hard. Rubber screamed against the pavement. The car cut through the metal guard like it was paper and sailed into the open air. It seemed to hang in slow motion for a split second, tires still spinning. Then the car, passengers and all, plummeted toward the cliffside below. And that's the first chapter.
All righty. Awesome. Thank you so much, Emily, for reading that and, leaving us on a cliffhanger. But I gather that you're not ending this novella on a cliffhanger. So the first chapter.
That's just the first chapter. So no, thank you for asking me. I know I'm not going to do a cliffhanger again. I had one reader who emailed me and said that she was crying at the end of the novella because she was so upset at where I left my character.
No.
That's when I decided I had to redo it. So I was like, well, at least I'm touching people, but not in the way that I would wanted to. So
you're so much nicer than I am. I would just be like, well, them's the breaks, kid. Get over it. Characters just.
The character in the first novella, it's Escape from Magic. It's on Book Funnel right now. Is Clara Stark, and she plays a role in the rest of the series. So I couldn't end her story right there because it would have given away up 4 books of my series out of the 6. So I did explain. I was like, I put in there, I'm so sorry to leave you hanging, but she plays a role. But people were still upset, so I decided to switch things up. But anyway, thank you for having me on here. It's always fun to read.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So anyway.
It's always a pleasure to have you. Okay. I will move on to our next person here. Cory Swanson, who's actually new to the show, but he has been in quite a few things. I was just making some notes, or at least, okay. Well, he said he's going to read from Venus the Monk tonight. And that is actually available, I think, on Kindle from Amazon. There's also a story that was featured on denverhorror.com called Terror in El Pueblo, among other things. So I will just bring Cory on here. Hello, Cory.
Hello, how are you?
I'm pretty good. So let's see. Did your family stop practicing playing their instruments?
They were practicing before the show started. I told them they had to be quiet now, so.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, all right, go ahead.
Yeah, tonight I'm going to read from Venus the Monk, which is the novel-length follow-up to a novella that I had published in 2019 by Castron Press called Geminis. The premise of that novella was there was two sisters, and one can remember, they're twin sisters. One remembers the past, just like normal. The other one remembers the future. And it's kind of gone into as more of something is up with her brain, where she can do that. So I don't want to spoil the novella in case anyone wants to read it, but she takes part in a study involving ketamine, where she takes ketamine and goes into an MRI, and something catastrophic happens. So in the sequel here, her sister Helen, who remembers normally, is noticing some of the same traits in her son. And she's actually gotten married to the doctor who was running that study. And her husband Jake has convinced her to do the study herself as a control, so they can compare her to the results from her sister. So basically, there's nothing more rebellious than doing a bunch of drugs. So that's where this part's going to come.
All right, nice. I will.
All right, cool. So let me pick it up, and also forgive me. This is it's written in Helen's voice, and I'm male, so it'll sound maybe a little weird. But here we go. Just remember what we agreed to, I told him in the car on the way over to the hospital. I know, Jake said. He looked good in his sunglasses, with his hair combed back like this. I could almost pretend he was some sort of rich lawyer in California. I won't touch Paris. You won't scan him, you won't study him or anything. Geez, Helen, you're talking like, even if I die. For a moment, the only sound was the road. You're not going to die, Helen. You need to promise me, Jake. I promise you're not going to die. I've hired 2 anesthesiologists. They'll check each other's work. There's no way. That's not the promise I want. How can you be so dense? I want you to promise that even if I die, you won't study Paris. Jake stared at the road. Promise me, Jake, or I won't even get out of this car today. Fine, he said, slamming his hand in frustration on the steering wheel. I promise. Why is that even a problem? Why does it upset you to promise that? I don't know. It's just, there's a lot of potential there. We could learn so much. He's your son, Jake. He's not an experiment. You're agreeing to be studied. He pouted like a little boy. Why is that so different? Because I know what I'm getting into. I understand the risks. Also, and I hesitated, I'm curious too. Having parked the car in the hospital lot, Jake glanced over at me. His expression sat warm on his face. I won't let anything happen to you, he said. You mean the world to me. But you're curious, like me. Of course I'm curious. My whole life is being curious. I know. I put my hand on his arm. And I don't want your curiosity to override your common sense. If I die, you need to be our child's father, not a mad scientist. Jake grabbed my hand. I promise. True to his word, there were 2 anesthesiologists on hand. Jake must have been paying them well, because they went over their math with me, and we did all the calculations twice. I was even weighed on 2 different scales to account for any errors or inaccuracies in the equipment. Still, I hesitated before they gave me the shot. Hold on, I said, catching my breath. The doctors were patient, but I must have waited a bit long, since Jake came out of his little booth to talk to me. You okay? He asked. I'm just, this is one of those moments where I feel like I'm standing on the edge of a cliff. I avoided looking at him. Look, honey, he began. And I feared he was about to get pedantic. Instead, he surprised me. I want you to remember this is a choice. You don't have to. I'm not forcing you to do this. But you want me to, I said. Well, of course. But this is your body, and this is your thing too. I want to because I'm curious, and I know you are too. But if you're worried about your safety, I'm not worried about my safety. The anesthesiologist gave sheepish smiles. You understand me, though, Jake said. If you want to walk away, I'll understand. You'll be disappointed. I managed to raise my eyes to his chin. But I won't hold it against you. We'll still be us. You never have to worry about that. Somehow that was all I needed. Okay, let's go, I said, to the doctor with the needle who was standing next to me. He swabbed the patch of my inner elbow with alcohol, and I had just enough time to feel its evaporative cooling before the needle poked into my skin. It hit me as soon as my heart could pump the ketamine up to my brain. A heaviness weighted my limbs, while an equal and opposite lightness made me feel like I was floating outside my body. The experience was a little sudden and a little much for someone so inexperienced with altered states. Here, we'll help you into the MRI, Jake said, holding out his hand. I giggled. Controlling my body like some puppeteer, I tried to get up, only to be pushed back down onto the gurney by the orderlies. It reminded me of some movie I'd seen where people occupied John Malkovich's brain and control him from within. Being lifted onto the table and motored into the machine felt like scaling a mountain, and time warped around me, my perception of its passage standing in all but a standstill. You need to lie on your back, Helen, came Jake's voice, piped in through the speaker somewhere in the machine. Laughter bubbled up through me like boiling water, and I flopped like a fish in the cramped tube, trying to figure out which way gravity wanted to pull me. You doing okay? Jake's disembodied voice came again. To be honest, it was euphoric. Yeah, I said, my lips feeling like animated clay. I'm great. Did I get on my back? I didn't mean to try to get up. I can't tell which way is down. Yes, you're fine. I heard the whirring of the machine spinning around my head. All right, your body should metabolize this fairly quickly, so let's get started. What is your name? Helen DeGeneres, I said, laughing at the sound of the words. Seriously, my husband's voice burbled through the speaker, his annoyed tone not lost on my altered mind. Please state your name. Okay, I said. I'm trying. My name is Helena Scapi. Another bout of uncontrollable laughter tumbled from my mouth. This isn't funny, Jake said. It is. I can't even talk. And it was true. My thoughts were only fragments, and I searched and searched for the strands of memory that would bring about my own name, but it just wouldn't come. It's all keeping muddling up. The speaker crackled back on, and there was a murmur before Jake spoke. Okay, I'm guessing that means we got the dosage in the sweet spot. Let's proceed. He asked me to repeat a string of numbers. I couldn't. He asked me for basic information like my address and my phone number. I still couldn't do it. This is scary. I can't remember anything. That's kind of the point, honey. I couldn't even remember who was talking to me. It's a dissociative drug. It puts you outside yourself. We're trying to look at how your brain works when your brain isn't working, especially the limbic system. By the end of this little lecture, I'd forgotten what we were talking about. Okay, Professor Science, I giggled. Way to put your thoughts in my science hole. I didn't know why I thought that was so funny, but after several attempts to calm me down, the little table beneath me scooted me out of the machine. The anesthesiologist helped me down, and I still stumbled to the floor, my paper hospital gown wrenching and tangling whichever way it pleased. Someone came through the door, offering me my clothes. You're cute, I said. Come on, honey, let's go get something on before you embarrass yourself. Don't honey me, I said, smacking him in the rear. This set off a wave of laughter strong enough to crumple me back to the ground. The anesthesiologist tried to help me up, but the man, Jake, waved them off. He tried to help me get dressed, but my limbs wouldn't cooperate. Okay, this is like trying to dress an unruly, full-grown child, he said. Will you go get a blanket? He asked one of the men, who nodded and ran off. The blanket felt good once the man returned, and I was wrapped in it. You doing okay? The first man asked. I'm great, I said, and I was. The men left the room, and I sat there, swaying and pitching. It felt like I was stuck in a time warp, but I was completely enveloped in the present. Thoughts of the past and fears for the future all disappeared. That was probably my favorite part of the whole experience. I was able to look at myself and my body and know it completely in that moment. Every wrinkle and every mole, every prickly hair on my legs, every green vein showing through my skin on my wrists. I was fascinated by myself. and that state persisted for what felt like an eternity. Slowly, though, the pieces clicked back into place. I felt myself returning to my body. I became fixated on the door across the way. Something is going to come through that door. It seems now as though that was a simple thought. Of course someone was going to come through the door. It only made sense that someone would come and get me at some point. They wouldn't leave me in that room forever, would they? Jake is going to come through that door. The moment felt so significant. It was the first time any sort of future thought had ever crossed my mind. There was no window, so I couldn't see anyone coming, and it was heavy enough, and it was a heavy enough door that I couldn't hear footsteps approaching. But I knew the moment it would happen. I felt it approaching. For a moment, I was terrified at the implications. I lifted my arm, poking it out of the blanket, waiting as I felt the moment approach. My arm descended, pointing straight ahead the second the door opened. "Oh my God," I said, covering my mouth with my other hand. That was so trippy. Jake walked in, a smile on his face. Generally, that's what drugs are. Trippy, I mean. No, you don't understand. The words escaped me, the moment gone. I couldn't really articulate what had happened. "Don't worry, you're coming down. Even though you're feeling normal, weird things are still going to hit you for a little while." I shrugged, looking down at myself. "I'm still naked." "No, you're not. You have a blanket and a hospital gown on." I'd forgotten. That was the weirdest damn thing, I told my husband as I dressed myself. I mean, for a moment, I was just me. No past, no future, just me. He smiled as one does with children and drunk people, giving me a hand once I buttoned up my shirt. I mean, there was nothing there except for right now. I know. That's why they use it to treat depression and anxiety. It helps you forget what's making you so depressed and anxious. I looked up at him, my sweet husband. I put my hands on his face. Did it work? Well, we clearly got the dosage right. He didn't die. The thought made me laugh. I'd forgotten how scared I'd been. Somehow, I remembered Cassie, but I felt insulated from the thought, like the past couldn't hurt me. "But did you get the data you needed?" "Yep, your brain works like a normal brain on ketamine. The proof in the pudding will be when we compare you to the other data set." "To Cassie?" "Yes." I grabbed my purse. "You're driving," I said. Jake laughed. "Of course." We held hands as we walked to the parking lot. I felt lucky. Lucky to be with him. Lucky to be alive. To be me. I pulled on his hand to stop him from stepping in front of a car that was tearing down the lane between the parked cars. "Jesus," Jake said. "I didn't even see him." "Neither did I said. And that's it. That's all I have.
Sorry, Cory. I was trying to push a button without, sending everything kerblooey, and it took me a while. But anyway, thank you so much. That was awesome and definitely very trippy. So, and I was reading in your bio on Amazon that you also teach band to tweens. That must also be trippy.
Yeah, I teach middle school band and orchestra up here in northern Colorado. So I don't know if you can tell if I'm a musician or not. But, so
I don't know. I wasn't getting that at all. I don't get it. No, I'm just kidding. Anyway, thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm so glad that you enthusiastically agreed to, try this out after I randomly messaged you on Instagram. So
yeah, no problem. I was excited, man. I want people to know about this book, so let's get it out there.
Awesome. Okay, so now we've got Richard. So, all right,
Hey.
How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Yeah, glad to be here. Always good to read out loud and listen to other stories. So,
yeah, it's always a good time.
Yeah, this story is called Gabriella, and it is
okay.
in the universe with my. I have 3 space opera novellas out, and what will be a series of 6. And this is in the same universe, although significantly in the future. And
okay.
The weird part is that, like I said, this one's R-rated. the other novellas are maybe PG.
Okay.
Which I found kind of ironic after writing this and then writing those. So the funny thing about this one, there was the very original, very, very bad version of this I wrote in college and let my girlfriend's roommate read it, and she was very effusive in her praise, and I thought that was pretty cool. And then later I found out she was trying to steal me from my girlfriend, and I hadn't even noticed.
Oh.
Yeah. Just not even noticed.
Well.
Not even a little bit, which I think my girlfriend appreciated, but
Well, at least you decided to revisit it on your own, after you realized what was really behind.
Yes. It was very bad. And this is completely new everything, basically. It's just the same sort of more or less story structure. But I will say R-rated and maybe a trigger warning for torture. So hopefully it won't be too bad. But I thought I should say that before I read it. So,
okay.
And then there's the other thing. I read it this afternoon and I'm going, I don't know if this was a good one to read out loud. There are multiple, there's a present tense, past tense thing going on back and forth in some scenes. And then there's stuff like at least a couple words I'm sure I'm pronouncing incorrectly. It's easy to go look up a word and put it on paper, in another language, and then I have to read it out loud. So
that's true.
I'm going to butcher it, but there it is. And then there was one, there were a couple in there of homonyms, like Lenin and Lenin, as in the Marxist and the Beatle.
Oh, okay.
So, you'll see when you get there. And then the other one was software, which is WEAR. Soft WEAR, which works if you're reading it because you can see that. Anyway,
true. Yeah,
it'll explain. It's fairly self-explanatory once you get there, but I thought I should explain how it was spelled before we get there. So,
okay.
Anyway, that's a longer introduction than I usually do. Okay. Here it is, Gabriella. I finally have my heart's desire. Why does it feel so wrong? Malika is here with me, sharing my bed at last. For so long, we were just roommates. I used to cherish the brush of her shoulder against mine, the touch of a hand. When she figured that out, she avoided touching me at all, and I had to content myself with her lessons on freedom and resistance. Now, lying in bed together, with the warp trains rumbling by overhead, I shudder in revulsion when her leg, smooth and soft, touches mine. What does my body know that I don't? I'm so confused, but I'm waiting for a sign. What sign? I don't know. Gabriella has stopped leaving me notes, and I have the strangest dreams, so vivid, so real. In this last one, I'm standing in my own bedroom, just standing, while Malika and Wu wrestle naked on the bed. I can't move. I want to help Malika, but I can't. Why do I need to help? I sweat and struggle in time with the pounding in my head. Why can't I move? Malika says something, but I can't hear. Then Wu turns to me. Oh, I forgot to mention, I'm going to take a drink between scenes. That way you'll know. I had met Wu at the warp train terminal. Malika and I both worked there, while other people came and went across the light years to Earth, Thurman, or Dove. We could never go. Instead, we donned our skimpy uniforms, took the regular train to the station, and served drinks at the casino. Malika watched the people, human and Cernelli both, as if waiting for someone. When Malika wore hose, the scars on her legs didn't show, and makeup covered the ones on her face. For a long time, she never told me who had hurt her. I'd always wondered why she'd been assigned to a job where looks mattered. The day I met Wu, a buzz ran through the terminal. The news on the screen showed the usual fluff pieces and human interest stories, but a name ran through the crowd. Angelco. He had escaped. Some said his name with fear, Angelco. Some said it with hatred, and some with hope, Angelco. But whispered so often it became a shout, Angelco. The shout echoed back as a question. Where is his Gabriella? She hadn't been caught with him, so if he had escaped, she should be back too. Of her, no word came. Malika came down the aisle between the slot machines with a drink tray. Stopped when she heard the whisper. Angelco. Standing with lips parted, she looked like she might laugh and cry and scream all at once. She schooled her features so fast that had I not been staring, I would have missed it. She knew him. Jealousy stabbed my heart. Blinking back tears, I turned and collided with Wu. Her drink splattered my shirt, and her data pad clattered to the floor. Grabbing me to keep from falling down, she pulled, and I thought we'd both go down. Her black hair brushed against my face, and her aroma, sweet peppers and lilacs, made me swoon. At last she caught me and set me upright again. I'm so sorry, I should have been watching, I said. Reaching down, I picked up her pad off the floor and handed it to her. She had the latest model, hollow keyboard, heads-up display, and terabyte wireless. The casino app lit up her screen. Giggling, Wu pulled out a handkerchief to dry me off. Don't be silly, you got the worst of it, and I wasn't watching either. Her touch made me feel like a school kid again. She had deep eyes and the same olive skin as Malika. I gestured toward the bar. The least I can do is buy you another drink. Beaming, Wu took my arm. I might just let you. I'm Wu. I'm Chris. You don't look Asian. Why had I said that? With another giggle, she leaned into my shoulder, sending a shiver down my spine. Looks can be deceiving, dear. Besides, anyone can change how they look. She tapped her pad, and her blue satin jumper turned into a charcoal business dress. It's all in the presentation. Usually I could spot software a mile away, but not this. Most people who wore programmable fabric showed it off, flashing colors and moving patterns. The dancers at the nightclubs down on the concourse showed hot naked bodies on their leotards, one of the reasons so many people entertained themselves inside the terminal. Something I read resonated. Bread and circuses to keep the people from thinking. Wu and I walked to the bar and had a drink. The bosses allowed it if the patron gambled while we talked, and Wu did, baccarat at a table for 6. While flirting with me, she won. After her third drink, her implant chimed, and she looked off into the distance. I'm sorry, I have to go. Leaning in, she kissed me on the mouth. I won't be back tomorrow. Will you be here the day after? I will. The casino seemed dimmer after she left. Could I be unfaithful to Malika? The guilty pang eased when I remembered she cared not at all for me, at least not that way. On the way home that night, I read one of Malika's paper books. She left them for me, picked the ones I should read. I'd never imagined the worlds in these books. School had always seemed boring to me, but before Malika, no one I'd ever met read paper books. I'd even gone with her to the antique store to pick some up a time or two. With her electronic books, Malika read ordinary escapist fiction. Her paper ones, however, included texts by Jefferson, Lenin, Mendeleev, Mandela, and Chambers, not to mention Lenin, Guthrie, and Park. Subversives and revolutionaries all. She said the government couldn't trace paper books, couldn't watch you read them. This time she'd picked up something on Robespierre for me. Someone had written notes on nearly every page about all his mistakes and the things he'd done right, too. Then, stuck between the pages, I found a note signed by Gabriella. In a spidery script, she asked me to consider how Robespierre saw tyranny in the king, but not in himself. How then does a revolutionary avoid becoming worse than those he threw out? Gabriella suggested studying Mandela and Tutu for an answer. For a moment, I just stared at the writing as the train glided toward my stop. All the margin notes were in the same hand. These were Gabriella's books. I had answered the question echoing back in the terminal. Gabriella was here, teaching me. Why would she pick me? In the days that followed, I got to know Wu better, and Gabriella left more books and notes for me. As I learned of oppression, resistance, and people who rose up against their government, I began to suspect Malika was Gabriella. I learned why and when and how people resisted. Sometimes the government started with good intent, watching citizens' activities, but when people get arrested without warrants and held without trials, good intentions become tyranny. More, when the government becomes about the few, the elite, rather than all the people, then it has to be resisted, changed. And Yelko used all the techniques, all Gabriella's teachings, facing off against the human Cernelli intergalactic hegemony. But his revolution had been squashed. How had he escaped from their prison? I wake in the night from a nightmare. I stood in my room watching Malika. I couldn't move. Wu bit her nipple, drawing blood. Where did he go? You can't resist me, you know. With a whimper, Malika closed her eyes, as if not seeing it meant it wouldn't happen. She didn't say anything. Why do you have to make things so unpleasant? It doesn't have to be this way. I can be kind. Wu caressed Malika's belly and down across her hip, soft and gentle, but Malika flinched. Or hurtful. Wu shifted her finger and her nail sliced Malika's thigh. As blood welled, I woke screaming. Malika sits and brushes back my hair, sweaty hair. Shh, everything is fine. It was just a dream. Go back to sleep. She keeps up the soft, soothing words until the images fade in the aroma of lilacs. Deep inside, a shudder grows at her touch, but I can't move. The lilac cannot be resisted, and Malika lays me down. She puts a hand over my eyes to close them. As I drift off, I understand what it means to be oppressed. In the morning, when the alarm buzzes, I roll over and turn it off. Malika doesn't move, as usual, but she's thrown off the covers. I trace the smooth, unblemished skin on her thigh where Wu had cut her. A dream. It never happened. Still, as I shower, steaming water running across my body, I remember what had happened next. I saw Wu 3 more times before I had the fight with Malika. But I want you to meet her. Malika didn't even look up from her book. I'd be happy to meet her at the terminal. I'm a private person. No one but you is allowed to come here. If I really like her, why can't I bring her home? I wanted Malika to be jealous, to say she wanted me for herself. Instead, she turned the page. You can, if you find your own home. Malika, not everyone is a CSB agent. That got her attention. Putting the book down without marking the page, she looked at me and traced a scar from the corner of her eye across her cheek. Everyone I meet could be. I was their guest for 2 years. They left me alive as a contingency. That didn't make any sense. What contingency? Realizing, I sank to the floor. In case Yelko escaped. Oh, Malika. I reached out, but even then, she didn't take my hand. Malika nodded. My heart tells me it isn't that simple, but there is little I can do to affect their game. If they'd released Malika to bait a trap, wouldn't they do more than watch? Or would they just watch closely? I looked around the room, wondering where bugs and cameras could be hidden. Malika smiled and patted my hand. You begin to catch on. I've found 14 so far. I expect there are more. I destroy some so they don't feel like they're wasting their time. But if they can hear us, Malika laughed. All they know is that I know, that they know, that I know ad infinitum. We're waiting on the next move. If they really wanted Malika, they could bust down the door. But with so many cameras everywhere, they tended to use more subtle methods. The court of public opinion could turn people against them. It was all about secrecy, so the news never played anything that mattered. Where had that thought come from? Once thought it rang true, though. More, they played and replayed the galactic games, distracting and unifying the people. With all that, we never set the alarm, though. Malika shook her head. No, we never set the alarm. What good would bells and buzzers do against the CSB? There may come a time when there's nothing left that you set the alarm. That makes no sense. I hope it never does. She gave me a sad, weary smile. I'm old, Chris, old and tired, and they don't believe I can't give them what they want. What do they want? Gabriella, of course. But Gabriella is gone. A shiver went through me. Angelco was never without his Gabriella, but she'd never been found. And Angelco had escaped, or did they let him go? If they wanted Gabriella, they might indeed use him as bait. I had no idea Malika had been involved in such things. To have known Angelco and Gabriella. How did Gabriella leave me those notes? I thought Malika might be Gabriella, but if she was, she could give them what they wanted. I rose from the floor. I won't bring Wu here. I'm glad you found someone. I enjoy seeing you happy because love is a thing of the past for me. I can never love again, not after all I've been through. You will still love Malika. You're young yet. She offered that same sad smile. No, I'm old, dead even. No one returns from the CSB torture houses alive. I started to object. Those places weren't real. But the scars on her face and her arms stopped me. Maybe they were real. I have to go. Wu will be waiting. Turning to leave, I found the evening's glorious anticipation tarnished. How could I flirt with Wu when I had Angelco and Gabriella, their rebellion and sacrifice, on my mind? I wander through the flat, touching Malika's things. On the early shift today, she has already left. I'll be heading in soon, but first I want to remind myself of her. In the study, I stop. Half the books are gone. Just gone. Stunned, I go to my old room where my clothes still hang. There, in the closet, are the books I'd taken to read. I pick up the one Malika had given me the day Angelco came. The cover says it is a book about an old singing group. Inside, Gabriella has made notes. One phrase sticks out at me. Even in the best of governments, secrecy breeds tyranny. The people must be educated. Sitting down to read the passages again, I remember feeling jealous when I saw Malika out in the terminal. While I delivered more drinks and fantasies, Malika had gone out on break. Outside the big doors, Malika stood by the wall wearing her coat and talking to a Sernelli, tall with a beak and bright feathers. Something in Malika's stance screamed fight or flight. She either wanted to fling herself at the alien or run from him. She did neither. I thought it was male, though Sernelli are hard to distinguish. After some words, Malika handed him a small object and shook her head. His beak fell, and she put a hand on the side of his head. For some reason, I heard what she said. Then, that last word, Yupko. What did it mean? He started away. Wu called my name. Turning, I held out my hand to her. She took it, but her eyes followed Malika and the retreating Sernelli. He slipped into a maintenance hatch and vanished. I had to get back to work. First, I found a drink for Wu, even as she whispered to someone on her implant. Moments later, the screens in the casino changed from news of the games to static, and the same Sernelli appeared. As he clicked and chirped, subtitles ran across the bottom. I am Angelco. For these past years, I have been held by the hegemony without trial. They have killed my Gabriella for the simple crime of telling the truth. The warp train terminals with their casinos and prostitutes, and the galactic games with their never-ending stories of victory and valor are nothing more than distractions. The hegemony doesn't want you to know what it is doing, doesn't want you to remember how oppressed you are. Even in the best governments, secrecy is tyranny. If they don't want you to know, they are doing things against your interest, against your freedom. Neither I nor my followers have harmed anyone. Yet we have been harmed. Wu leaped up and strode away without even a glance at me. Everyone listened in the silent casino. It was never silent. The building exploded. The floor rose to meet my face. Fire consumed people and gambling tables. I struggled to breathe. I should do something, but couldn't think what. There had been drills. Rolling to my back, I looked up at puffy clouds where the roof had been. There in the sky floated a ship, a single-seat fighter with ionization trails running down to the terminal. It was such an odd sight that I raised my pad and recorded it, even with fire extinguishers going off around me. The warp trains had made spaceships rare in the inner planets. They only flew out on the frontier. What happened? A man next to me asked. Did Anyelka blow up the terminal? Yes, a woman shrieked. Blinking, my brain came partway back. What had I been thinking? No, look! I pointed up at the ship as it turned and glided upward. Moments later, it vanished. Sirens wailed and people screamed, but I just lay on the ground. Malika found me. She leaned over, her hair singed and dress covered in soot. Are you hurt? Don't think so. I felt no pain. She knelt and ran her hands through my hair, down my neck and shoulders. I'd so long wanted her to do that. Then Wu appeared on the other side. They glared at each other. They'd never met. Introductions. I needed to introduce them. Wu, Malika. I waved my hand between them. They still glared, so I groaned. My head throbbed. Malika's attention focused on me then. Can you move your head? She put a hand on each side. When I did, it nauseated me. She had me move each foot and leg. Let's sit you up. You may vomit. I did. Bring up pita, hummus, and grapes. The medics will be here soon. She'll be fine, Wu said. Malika gave Wu a searching look, seeing a gash on Wu's forehead, a big bruise on her leg. Malika nodded. It's just a concussion. We need to get out of here. As they stood me up, armored hegemony police appeared. They checked everyone, rounding up any who could move. I passed out. I look up Ilupko. It's an old Macedonian name, meaning beloved. Sitting down on my old bed, I cry. Gabriella is dead, and Yelko vanished and blamed for the explosion. I should go to work, but I just don't care. Instead, I doze after the tears run out. The dream can't be real because Malika is here. I remember flashes at the hospital, lying on a bed, staring at the ceiling, a doctor shining a light in my eye, a nurse with cold hands. I dream about what happened after, things my concussed mind imagined. The room swayed. It was my bedroom. Wu turned and put her hands on my face. I think you should just watch this. She kissed me, her tongue tasting like cough syrup, and forget, too. Then her mouth tasted of jasmine. I blinked, and Malika writhed naked on the bed while Wu stood over her. Blood dripped from Wu's hands and splattered on her skin. You will tell me where to find Anyelko and Gabriella. Both. Between the truth drugs and the pain, you have no choice. Malika stilled herself and grinned, her teeth glinting red. You're wrong. Even in torture, I choose to give in or die. Wu cocked her head and set one razor fingernail gently on Malika's pubic mound. You have no such choice. You live when I say, you die when I say, you talk when I say. Wu applied a little pressure, and Malika squirmed, fist grabbing sheets. I wanted to squirm but couldn't. Malika just gave Wu a tight grin again. Pain means nothing. Nothing? Wu casually sliced the flesh, watching Malika's face, but the grin never changed. Reaching up, Wu rubbed the blood across Malika's cheek. You are strong, but there are always ways. Wu walked over to me and, smiling, ran her hand through my hair. When she leaned in to kiss me, I tried to pull away. She held me fast, pushed her tongue between my lips. This time it tasted of peppermint and salt blood. Who was this woman? I'd forgotten her name. My body reacted to her even when I told it not to. After what seemed forever, I relaxed and our mouths parted. She whispered in my ear, I am Malika. That made no sense. How could she be Malika? When she walked away, I saw it. Dark hair, smooth skin. It had to be Malika. She walked back to the bed where another woman lay. Who was that? She had dark hair too. Was that Wu? Why would Malika hurt Wu? Was she jealous? Malika ran her razor nail around Wu's areola. Wu writhed but made no sound. Tell me where to find Gabriella. Wu chuckled and choked. Gabriella is dead. You killed her, but she will rise again. The tortured woman glanced at me. Little Chris, the cocktail waitress, is more danger to you than I am. Me? I wasn't a danger to anyone, especially not Malika. Why couldn't I wake? Why wouldn't this dream end? You will not mock me. You will answer. Malika pressed her nail into Wu's left nipple, pushing it inward. Raising both hands to grab Malika's wrist, Wu squirmed. No, please no. Malika smiled until Wu pulled hard on her arm. She lifted her shoulders off the bed. The sharp nail penetrated the skin, and Malika's finger sank all the way into Wu's chest. I win, and Yoko will win. She sank back down, leaving Malika staring at her blood-soaked finger and the red torrents spurting from Wu's chest. Wu stared at her own blood, too, a slow smile spreading across her face. Choking, blood trickling from her mouth, she turned to look at me. Puzzle Ulupko. I didn't understand. Why couldn't I wake up? Malika bent over Wu and shook her. Damn you, tell me where Gabriella is. Where did Anielko go? Wu just smiled wider. Then her chest heaved. She couldn't breathe, and more blood poured from her mouth. Closing her eyes, triumph crossed her face. After 3 more breaths, she choked, slumped down, and lay still. Malika thumped Wu's chest. Damn it! When Malika turned, she looked at me. It's just you and me now, love. We'll have to see what happens next. I wake at last. More tears run down my cheeks and over my nose. Gabriella is dead, and Yelko gone. Who will speak for the people? Rising, I walk to my book collection. I find one with Gabriella's writings. Under it lie 3 paperbacks I've never seen, all sealed in plastic. Gulliver's Travels, Around the World in 80 Days, and How Spacesuit Will Travel. How could Malika afford these rare, expensive books? Taking the whole collection, I sit on the bed to puzzle. First, there's the Ulupko puzzle, because Ulupko was another name for Anielko. And 3 books about travel to and from and around Earth. Could it be that simple? The plan comes to me all at once. Sell the 3 near priceless books to the antique dealer and buy a ticket to Earth, the one place they would never look for Anielko. Getting up, I take the books and walk to the door. Malika must not follow me, and I will not be back. I set the alarm. Anielko, I'm coming. Together we will teach the people to rise up. We'll do it for Gabriella. I will be your Gabriella, since she cannot come. The end.
Hi, Richard. Okay.
Hi.
So, yes, I made it back. I didn't leave you waiting for me to, say anything.
That's okay.
Sit there forever. Okay. So thank you for the story. Definitely was R-rated.
Yes.
Let me just bring our peoples back here. Okay, cool. So let's see. I guess I tried to be a little bit organized. I and actually wrote a few questions down just to like sort of run the discussion instead of it running me for a change. So, I mean, I'm just wondering because I'm not like really having much luck staying motivated with my writing at all lately. So I'm wondering how other people are doing with that. And I don't know. Do you want to start us off, Cory?
With how writing is going with all.
Yeah, staying motivated with writing in the pandemic times.
I'm in the 5 a.m. club. Like I was having trouble writing before the pandemic, and then the night with lots going on, and I start getting up really early in the morning, and that's been great for me because the discipline to get up there. It's you better do something with that time, I guess, is what ends up happening. So I do end up getting a pretty good clip done in the morning. So.
All right. What about you, Gwynne?
I don't know. Where is it written that people have to write every single day? Just everywhere. But I don't think the muse always requires us to write every single day. I know that's what we're taught, at least I have been in many seminars. Pick a time, be disciplined, sit down, write. That has never worked for me. I guess waking up at 3 a.m. in the morning because a character is talking to me is weird too. But if it happens at 3 a.m., I'm up at 3 a.m. writing. I just guess I'm more of an impulsive kind of a personality, and that feeds into the way I create as well. But I'm not sure the people who advocate discipline aren't right. It's just that I'm not a very disciplined individual.
Well, what about you, Richard? Do you think that there needs to be, I mean, do you think discipline is the way to go, or is that only when it's fun discipline?
Well, I mean, if the discipline takes the fun out of it, that's not, then you're probably not going to be writing anyway. To me, as long as you're finishing stories, start a story, finish a story, whatever works for you. It's the finishing the stories that matters, and then you can make them good afterwards. That's a different process. But yeah, right now I'm actually having I'm a little stuck on the sixth of my novellas in that series. The last one, I'm in probably 2/3 of the way done with it, and I'm kind of stuck. So I need to probably go back to the beginning and read it again and see where I am. But normally I don't have much trouble keeping writing. And sometimes, I go write something else for a while or work on editing.
Like poetry maybe, or?
No, different stories, but yeah, poetry would work if it works for you. Yeah. Even journals, whatever, putting words on, putting words down helps. I think part of that is and Amy, you probably know more about this than I do. The way the brain learns is, we practice writing, and our brain learns how to do it better. So even writing a journal is still writing. So it's part of that deal. All right.
I like that thought.
Okay. Well, so Emily, what are you doing to stay motivated with your writing?
I think my biggest thing lately is trying not to be as hard on myself. Sometimes life throws you curveballs, and I think that it's really easy as creative people to get really down when maybe we don't, write every day, or maybe something. I mean, I was in a car accident in April and I had a concussion and I missed my deadline with my editor. I couldn't write, actually. I mean, it really wasn't working. My kids would make fun of me because I'd be like, well, I need a word, looking for this word. So for a couple of months, I kind of lost it, the ability to do it. But I came back. I finished the book that I was supposed to finish. I'm editing it now. But I just think that sometimes if we get in our head too much, you get in your own way. So accepting that, sometimes life's going to throw you a curveball, but you get back up on the horse. We keep going, keep trucking along. I missed my deadline. My book's going to be out late. That was supposed to be out in October. It won't be out till early next year. That's if I can get some serious editing done.
Okay. No, go ahead. Sorry.
But I don't know. I think just not getting too much in your own head and letting yourself, if you have a bad day, I mean, tomorrow's a new one. So don't dwell on what you didn't do. Just more dwell on, hey, I got this much done. And if it's only an hour, great. And anyway, that's what I'm trying to do for myself lately. This during the pandemic, I homeschooled my she's a freshman. She was a freshman. Now she's a sophomore.
Oh,
That
wow.
was, 6 hours a day of doing homeschool, and I didn't get as much writing done. But so there's been a lot of stuff that's come up, but I still wrote a book during that time. So I'm, focusing on the good parts and still trying to do stuff like this. What can I do? I'm coming on Stories Live, even though, I didn't want to. I was
Oh,
We're so glad you did.
yes.
So, but that's what I'm trying to do is just take the wins, not be so hard on myself with the losses, and keep going. So whatever the process is, just don't give up. So
Yeah. I have a deadline story for you, though. This was years ago. I don't know. Do any of you know who Ed Bryant was?
Mhm.
He was a local author who just helped out a bunch of other authors for years and years and years. Anyway, one time at Mount Hicon, I was standing around with Ed Bryant, George R.R. Martin, and Simon Hawke, who probably none of you have ever heard of. And Simon was lamenting that for the first time in his career, he'd missed a deadline. And Ed said, "When was the deadline?" So this is the end of October. And he said, "September 25th. And Ed said, "That's not missing a deadline. I had a novel due in 1972. So,
Yep. Well, there you go. Yeah, well, that's definitely, I think that's a really, some good advice, though, that, everything from, the gamut of finding time that works for you, but also just maybe giving yourself some grace to trust your own process. And I guess, the other thing, I know it's kind of getting late and we all want to, embrace the summer lazy, but does anybody have anything that they're reading right now that they're enjoying that they would recommend to anybody? Everyone's like, what?
No, I don't. I've been trying to read some stuff to get ready because I'm going to be at RMFW as well, Amy. Because yep. So I'm going to be doing a couple classes too because I'm I do the newsletter for RMFW, so I'm on the board. And then I got to be part of the conference committee too, so I got to read all the proposals. And I voted for it, just as an FYI. But no, right now I'm reading things to look for bad examples.
Okay.
Of world building, so I don't have any good recommendations. I don't want to call out bad ones. And
okay.
So
I got one. If it's not a new book necessarily, but Curtis Craddock, An Alchemy of Masks and Mirrors. It's a steampunk fantasy, and it's really, really good. I haven't read the second one. It's a trilogy. I haven't read the second one yet, but he's a local author, and it's really, really good. So I recommend it highly. So go out and get it.
Okay. So Cory, what did you? I know you were going to say something.
I was just I came into a large collection of old sci-fi. Well, so I'm currently doing my first. I've never read Arthur C. Clarke before because I'm an idiot, I guess. So, there's that one. I've been reading the Songs of Distant Earth, which is fascinating, and it's weird because every one of these sparks some idea in my head. And I'm like, oh, I got to do something like that. somebody else can say something. I'm gonna grab some really cool old.
Oh, okay.
All right.
So, what have you got, Gwynne?
Well, I just finished a book that was written like, I don't know, 15 years ago, I guess, called, and I think I have the title right, 84 Charing Cross Road. And it's about an American author who engages in a long correspondence with a book store in Britain, in London. And it just sounds so boring, but I'm reading it for a book club that I'm going to be presenting to here at the end of the month. And I wanted to be able to participate in the book that they were all reading so that I would have a feeling for who they were before I talked. And I was amazed at how good it was. And it's the sort of thing that usually just bores me to tears. It was nothing but letters. She'd write a letter. They never met, these two people. She'd write a letter and request a certain out of print book or something of that nature. They were a specialty bookstore. And he would respond. And over a 20-year period, you learn about her entire life, his entire life, their families, and everything else just through these letters. And they're about a paragraph, maybe 2 paragraphs long each. And apparently back 10, 15 years ago when this came out, it was a bestseller. And now I can see why, because as soon as the story was over, I was so disappointed that it was over that I went back and started reading it again. Have you ever done that? It was like, I can't let this go. And I was halfway through it the second time. It's a very slim little novel before I realized that I was rereading the same book over again. So I guess the moral to this story is we don't always know what's going to make good fiction. We have our own prejudices, and I certainly would have never read something that if someone had told me it was just a series of letters. And it was a real story. These were real letters, but it was fascinating. And it can be read in about, I don't know, max an hour. But if you've ever thought of, if you have a hoard of correspondence of your own that you thought might make a good story, I would read that book. It's easy to read, and it's just so very engaging. 84 Charing Cross Road, I think.
I was thinking the modern epistolary equivalent would be like if somebody published all of their text messages from the last 6 years.
Not very true.
You'd learn a lot. You'd also get a lot of minutia.
It's a difficult method to write. There's of course the Screwtape Letters, which is probably the most famous one in that style. C.S. Lewis, and there's one by Robin Hobb, which is in Robert Silverberg's collection. Anyway, it's just freaking marvelous.
Yeah.
You can do it well. It's just not easy.
Both following epistolary.
We're getting some interference.
Is that me?
Can't.
Is that working? Oh, geez.
But
okay. My feed is really weird. You sound like robot.
That's weird.
I don't know. Something strange is going on.
That was strange.
Oh,
she goes away, now it's fine. iRobot has taken over the feed.
If I mute myself.
Did it help?
Is that better?
Yeah. Once they muted, I can
That's
get
really
the rest
strange.
I guess I was trying to say that the best epistolary book I think I ever read was Lincoln in the Bottle by George Saunders. Have you ever read that?
No.
Now,
heard of it.
It's absolutely crazy and probably one of the best books I've ever read. And if I could write like anybody, it would be him. And then I'll share, this is an old fantasy and science fiction from like 1968. Cool, crazy old pulp covers.
Fritz
Wow.
Lieber, Aldous.
Yeah, I know. There's some names. It's crazy.
Wow.
I know. So I got a whole...
That reminds me of one time, long time ago, I had a subscription to fantasy and science fiction. And it got to a place where I would just not even pay attention. I just pick it up and start reading. And one day I picked it up and started reading and read the story and said, man, this is really good. And then I read the next one. This is really good too. And when the third one was really good, I went and looked at the cover. And it was like Orson Scott Card and James Tiptree. It was like the 35th anniversary edition. So it was all big name authors. And the lesson was, oh, there really is a difference between these guys and everybody else who publishes here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it's hard to get in that magazine in just period. So
Yeah.
Rise of the...
Yeah.
Trying to unmute myself. We'll see if this doesn't do things. I don't know. My AirPods were like dying, and so maybe that
Maybe that was it.
did something. I don't know.
We don't want your AirPods to die. That's
No, it's very sad. Well, that's, I've got backup headsets on headsets, I mean, that's just pandemic life right now. So, especially for a shrink. Alrighty. Well, I guess we should probably wrap up. It's almost 9 o'clock here, and I don't want anybody to pumpkin before, our time is over. But I don't know. Thank you, everybody, for coming and for reading. And, Cory, again, thanks for coming and joining us. I hope you had fun and are willing to, come back at some point.
Definitely. That was a good time.
Awesome.
Yeah. Thank you for hosting.
Absolutely.
Thank you. It's really great meeting all of you. And I've heard your names, but
Yeah.
see you in person and hear you chat and stuff. It's really cool. So
Yeah, nice to meet everybody.
Yeah.
All right. Well, and take care, Emily. I hope, things get better for you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. Hoping I'll make it to the conference in October. We'll see.
Yeah, I'll knock on wood. Okay. All right. Good night, all.
Good
night.
Good
night.
night, everybody.
take care.
Did I cut you off, Gwynne?
No, I just said hope to see you again. No problem.
Oh, okay. Have a good night. All right. So yeah, I mean, that's our show tonight. Everybody, sorry I'm in the dark. I was trying to, troubleshoot the interference thing and, just was like taking stuff off my desk, like desperately trying to figure it out. Let's see. The only other thing, I just wanted to mention that if you are looking for a venue, actually, this is a couple of things for people who write flash fiction. There's actually a Ghosts of Downtown flash fiction submission opportunity. And you can submit to that by sending an email to ipp@pikespeakwriters.com. The IPP stands for Immediate Past President. And basically the requirements for that are a 1-page, single-spaced, 11-point font ghost story about downtown Colorado Springs. And the idea with that is that the, I forget exactly what their name is, but it's like historic downtown Colorado Springs does a walking tour around Halloween of the downtown area and could use your story as like a story that they would tell on their walking tour to, the group that they're leading around. So it's kind of a fun one. Next episode is on September 15th. That's going to be at 7 p.m. Mountain Time that will be online. And so far we have Rosanna Frechette and Katie Webster, and the theme is the Spooky Campfire Edition. So I love Halloween. So with this show, we have the Spooky Campfire Edition and we have a Halloween show. So it's like a bonus. Anyway, if you're interested in reading for that, feel free to send me a PM on Facebook, or you can email me at amy@storieslive@gmail.com. And let's see what else. Oh yes, Flash Fiction. The other opportunity there is Rosanna Frechette actually helped start a reading venue, which is typically at the Mercury Cafe over on California Street in Denver. They're currently doing a lot of their readings online via Zoom. And that meets on, I was just looking at it. Where is my brain? Okay, the third Tuesday of every month except for December. And so if you're interested in that and you want the Zoom link, you can either find F-Bomb Denver on Facebook and send them a message, or you can send an email to Nicholas B. Morris, and his email is nicholasbmorris@yahoo.com. So that's Nicholas spelled the normal way, the letter B, Morris with 2 R's and 1 S. And that's at yahoo.com. So again, that's flash fiction if you're interested, and they define flash fiction as a complete story told in 1,000 words or less. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me, and hopefully I will see you at RMFW. Just a reminder, I will be presenting the Friday of that conference at 4 p.m. So feel free to show up, and if it's a small group, we can talk a little bit about grief and have a glass of wine together or whatever. It's always a good time. So otherwise, I will see you in September. Take care, stay well, don't breathe on anybody. All right.